Yeah, I'm sorry for reading this, but I tried to put this all together, and it's too bizarre to remember. So I believe this is for Dr. D'Souza. I believe you call yourself a Christian, and so for the sake of argument, let's accept your argument that there is a creator of the universe, and that creator is omniscient. What would make you go from that to that he's like also a loving God, and he created us in his perfect image, but then we turned out to be imperfect, so he decided to cast us down to burn hell, but then he didn't feel so good about that, so the only loophole he could come up with, the creator of the universe, was to immaculately conceive a human child and have him tortured and killed, and we're still imperfect, but that's okay if we suck up to him and the child, and he doesn't want us to be gay, and so on.
Okay, let me try to answer kind of in the spirit. And that's this. Look, if you are trying to understand a phenomenon, whether you agree with it or not, you begin by understanding it by trying to understand it as the believer or the practitioner understands it themselves. If I was trying to understand Dostoevsky or take Hamlet, I wouldn't go, well, this is absolutely ridiculous. Witches appearing and so on. It's absurd. I'd throw the novel down right away. I'm not going to read it. It's absurd. No, I suspend my disbelief. I say, let me try to experience Hamlet in the way Shakespeare wanted it experienced. And then once I've finished, once I've evaluated critically, I can step back and go, well, that didn't make much sense, and that didn't really follow from that, and why is Hamlet so indecisive, and so on. Okay, here's what I want to get at. Let me give you, if I'm in 1 minute, the Christian reformulation of your statement of the human problem. The Christian formulation is this, and that is, quite apart from religion, we have a human problem. Namely, we live at two levels. We live here, and we want to be here. In other words, we want to be good, but we realize we fall short. We want to experience the divine, but God is invisible. He's not real to us on a daily basis. We feel the awful silence, you may say, speak from outside. So here we are as human beings, we're at this level. We want to ultimately experience the sublime. True? I think all human beings are that way. And that's why we have not just religion, we have art, we have literature, we have love, ways of experiencing the sublime. Now, the different religions of the world all diagnose the human problem that way. And I see the Eastern religions as having one solution. The problem is the self, get rid of the self. I see the Judaism and Islam as having a common solution, which is basically, let's establish a set of rules and codes to bridge the gap between, you may say, man down here and God up here. And this involves dietary regulations and sacrifices and commandments and so on. And Christianity comes along and gives a totally different answer to that question. Namely, look, the distance between the humans and the divine is so large that no matter how tall a ladder you build, you're not going to get there. Basically, the only way for man to reach God is for God to come down to man's level. And I'm stating this in very secular terms. So the incarnation is seen not as just some bloody sacrifice. I mean, most Christians would emphasize not the crucifixion, but the resurrection. The idea here is that in the ancient world, you had a lot of blood. Look at all the blood the Aztecs spilled. Look at all the blood sacrifices in the ancient world. Basically, Christianity comes along, and the basic argument is God sacrifices his son, and that's the end of all the blood sacrifice. No more need to kill goats. No more need to take people and slap them on the altars and chop their heads off. And this was widespread in the ancient world in pagan cultures. And these blood sacrifices, I would argue, have been revived in modern paganism and modern atheism. This idea that blood itself is a source of power. Just read the rhetoric of the Nazis. There's a lot of talk about blood. Volk, blood. This idea of purifying blood is a revival of ancient animism, and I would argue ancient paganism, but given as secular guise. I mean, Hitler, for example, spent a lot of time talking about the Nordic legends, a lot of time talking about the ancient gods. The only difference was he didn't believe in them. He was trying to give them a secular reinterpretation. All right, I'm going on, but what I'm getting at here is simply that the Christian experience is very different than your, I think, caricature of it. So if we're going to get away from cartoon belief, I'd like to see my belief. I don't mind having them criticized, but I'd like to see them criticized in the way that I articulate them and defend them.
Well, is there a question for Professor Dennett?
Thank you. I sort of have what is sort of, I think, a logical... Is it on? Okay. I sort of have what I would think is a logical follow-up to the last question. And my question is tying it also to the idea of Pascal's wager. So Pascal's wager, as I see it, as you've proposed it, is predicated on the idea that there are two options. There's closeness to God and there are disbelief and belief. My question, though, is when you have Christians who tell me that the only way to heaven is through belief in Jesus Christ, and you have Muslims telling me that the only way is through a set of beliefs in Muhammad, and Jews or Buddhists or any other belief telling me their belief is the only valid belief structure, don't you have to at least reevaluate Pascal's wager to the point where the logical option is at least agnosticism and at most atheism?
Yeah.
I'd put the point even more strongly. If we're talking about rationality, why don't you bet on all of them at once? If it's really, if one wager is good, we'll go for all of them, and that way you got all your bases covered.
Well, that's not rational because these religions do make some mutually exclusive claims. But I would say quite seriously that if you're taking your point seriously and following it, the conclusion is not. I mean, look, let's look by analogy. We conduct a survey of all the world's cultures, okay, tomorrow, and I ask them only scientific questions. What do you think about Kepler's laws? What do you think about evolution? What do you think about Einstein? I submit to you we will get a wide range of answers. Many people may say, well, you know, I've listened to the arguments, I'm going to go with Ptolemy on that one. Well, I've listened to all this, I think old Einstein was basically joking. So you might get the vast majority of the world's people go thumbs down on Darwin, thumbs down on Einstein. But you don't go from that, well, you know what? The disagreement of all these different cultures clearly convinces me that there's no true answer. I will be an atheist and agnostic on these issues from now on. You would see that as a total non sequitur. Why? Because you believe that there is a right answer and it's your job to find out what it is. So if you follow your premise seriously, yes, the religions of the world have certain common elements, common morality. Many of them today, at least, posit a monotheistic creator. And I would say it's your job to go find out which one is making true claims. Spend some time and take it seriously, and then decide what you think is the right way to go. I'm not asking you to go any other way than what you think is right, but to just in a facile way go, there's 10 of them, and they can't all be right, so I'll choose none of the above. That's not a very rational solution.